Let's talk about making up our minds. If you're like me, you've heard people on the right describe everyone on the left as both fascist and communist, which is weird if you know anything about the history of those terms. And you also have friends on the left who call everybody on the right Christian nationalists, which is also weird if you know what that means. There's so much nonsense out there. How do we make sense of it? I recognize that about 1/4 of us are yellow dog Democrats and another fourth of us are yellow dog Republicans, which means that it doesn't matter what the policies are or what the candidate's qualifications are. We're going to vote for the one that's wearing our team's jersey no matter what. That's the group who find themselves getting caught up in defending the nonsense, the lies, and the vitriol of a lot of yellow dogs out there who don't have any place in our politics. I'm not talking to that group. The good news is that the vast majority of Americans, about 50% of us, are not yellow dog partisans, but simply passionate, patriotic Americans who take each candidate and each policy proposal on its own merits and try to figure out to the best of our ability what's in the best interest of this American project. We see that as our duty, our sacred duty as citizens. And if that describes you, you're the one I'm talking to today. Here's how I think about it. We need a criterion, ideally an ecumenical criterion, to help us sort through all the nonsense, to help us recognize the visions that most advance the values we most cherish. If we can find those visions and support them, then we're on our way to doing our duty as citizens. There's one American value that I think is the ideal moral compass. It's the one value that we all agree on, that all the parties claim to be defending. It's the value that on surveys we Americans say is the most important of all American values, and the one value that we rank more highly than any other people in the world. I'm talking about freedom. Freedom, I think, is the ideal moral compass to help us navigate the political terrain we have right now in 2024. The problem is that we don't actually agree on what freedom is. Now, there are many concepts in our history and today of freedom, but two right now are especially salient. The first is freedom as non-interference. So let's talk about that one. The basic idea of freedom as non-interference is that we are free as long as no one, no person, or no entity has the right to interfere with our pursuit of prosperity in either our personal or our business lives. In other words, it conceives of freedom as free reign. When you have that kind of thinking, you quickly conclude that the role of government is very limited. It's to protect us from violence, to ensure that non-interference, and pretty much to leave us alone as we go about the task of flourishing in our own way in our private and our business lives. If I'm free only when others say I'm free, if I'm free only when other people or other groups benevolently choose not to execute their power over me, well, then I'm not really free. Let me give you an example. More than half of all Americans, and let's not make this a racial trope, I'm saying all Americans of all skin hues, more than half of all Americans live paycheck to paycheck, struggling from period to period just to sustain their families with sufficient food and shelter to afford the basic liberties that most of us enjoy. Now, let's not racialize my example and thereby dismiss it. When I'm talking about Americans who subsist in poverty, I'm talking about Americans of all skin hues, the majority of which are pale-faced like me. This isn't a race issue. This is America's reality. The poverty example is something we should take seriously and historically have. So how do we love well our neighbors who subsist in poverty? Well, one thing we can say, and often do, is that we are all equal under the law and have equal opportunity, and they can rely on our charity when circumstances require it. When we answer, though, in that way, we are saying that we are willing to allow citizens to live in circumstances where their ability to participate in the basic liberties of citizenship are not dependent upon themselves, but are dependent upon our willingness to be charitable. They are, in other words, like my example of the horse who has free rein, but is actually never free insofar as I can always pull back on the reins and redirect them. Such citizens are not equal citizens to you and me. They have the facade of freedom and do not share equally in the promises of American citizenship. That's not the promise that we inherited from our forebears. That's the conclusion reached by our forebears way back in the depths of the Great Depression. They imagined a safety net to prevent people from suffering the extremes of poverty in their old age. They created for us out of that imagination a host of vehicles, the principal of which was the Social Security system that we take for granted today. The social safety net that we Americans have been imagining and constructing over the last century isn't about ensuring equal outcomes. It's about ensuring equal shares in the sovereignty of the American people. It's a simple principle. The principle that our duty is to construct a nation in which all people are free. And in this case, it means ensuring that the poor will never be dominated by the wealthy. So the concept of freedom as non-interference leads us to be insufficiently free. The idea of freedom that I advocate for use as our moral compass is much more robust. It's the concept that the founding generation had when they negotiated our Constitution. It's the concept of freedom that they had when they fought for their freedom under flags that said, "Don't tread on me." It's the concept of freedom that they had very close in mind when they began our nation with the declaration that their understanding is that under God, all humans are created equal. Our founding generation understood freedom not as non-interference. Mind your own business was the minimum condition for them, the entry point into freedom, a given. No, they sought to build and to imagine a society in which all are equal participants in citizenship in an equal way. All are created equal, and that meant for them freedom as non-domination. No person, no individual should be allowed to dominate another. We are no longer subjects to bishops. We are no longer subject to kings or to parliament. We are equal citizens who share equally through one vote that's the same whether we are male or female today, whether we are rich or poor, no matter our creed. One nation, indivisible, sharing in the sovereignty of the people who govern for the benefit of all. That was the vision of our founding generation. So for our founding generation, to be free meant to live in a society where no one was allowed to dominate others. No entity, no government, no person would have the power to dominate others. Now, our founding generation wasn't stupid. They knew that they didn't achieve that society merely by imagining it. After all, they themselves were the heirs to a society that did not have such freedom. They lived in a very much hierarchical society in which the wealthy and the religious elites and others had undue privilege, and they imagined a different world. They didn't achieve it, so they bequeathed that vision to us, to future generations, and left to us the task of imagining how to construct such a society. That's our inheritance, and that's our responsibility. So how do we make up our minds in 2024? I think our moral compass points to the answer. Which vision invites us to squander that which was bequeathed to us, that charge that was given us? Which vision invites us to give up on the American dream? A dream we've not yet achieved, but we've been working on since 1776. Which vision seduces us like sirens to surrender to a vision of freedom that is insufficiently free for most Americans? Which vision summons us to rise to the challenge of constructing that society, to resume the work that we've not yet completed, of building a society in which all Americans share equally in the liberties, the basic liberties of citizenship? No matter race, no matter gender, no matter creed, no matter whether they're poor or wealthy, equal, not just before the law, but in their voice, in their share in the sovereignty of our people. Which vision invites us to carry on with our responsibility to build America? If, like me, you commit yourself to constructing a society in which no one dominates and no one is dominated, then your mind will settle on the vision that is best for America. And your vote will bless this generation and the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that. My prayer is that those of us who are not yellow dog Democrats or yellow dog Republicans will rise up in 2024, and we will let freedom ring. And it will reign in America forever and ever. Amen.